Musical and artistic creativity have been a part of the Sinai experience since the very beginning. Come with us now as we meet some of the people who bring new and interesting facets to that creativity. This is Musical Mondays Plus. Since his days starring as the lead guitarist and singer of the internationally acclaimed rock group Edward Bear, Danny Marks has been a musical institution here in Toronto, but with a surprising connection to Temple Sinai. He will be our next Robert and Ann Strom concert star in a concert entitled Jews and Blues. And we're going to interview him now. And our interviewer is Temple member and co-artistic director of the Harold Green Jewish Theater, Mr. David Eisner.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is David Eisner with the Harold Green Jewish Theater Company. It is my pleasure to do this series for Temple Sinai about culture. And what a thrill to have with us today, Danny Marks.
It's just a miracle of modern science.
There are too many descriptions of his career, whether it's a broadcaster, musician, comedian, actor, writer. It just goes on and on. If you can hear this, this is a song that Danny played when he won the Lifetime Achievement in Music and Broadcasting at the Blues with a Feeling Award, which tells you this goes way back, and he's had a fabulous career. We're so thrilled to have you. Danny Marks, how you doing?
I'm right here and I'm well. It's great to see you, David, through the miracle of Zoom technology.
Absolutely. How you been coping with the COVID? Have you been, I know you're on Jazz FM.
I am currently on Jazz FM 91 and I'm approaching my 20th year as a broadcaster on that station. And it was just fabulous the way it happened because I was on CBC for a long time, and people might remember the Hum Line, a program we did. And then one day when it looked like the Hum Line and Arthur Black was about to retire, I got a call from a guy named Chuck Camrew at the old CJRT, went down, had a meeting, and I did my best to impress them, and he gave me the job.
Incredible. 20 years, and it goes back to broadcasting. Let's go back a little bit to the beginning. I know you mentioned to me that your brother and your parents introduced you to music, a specific type of music in the 30s and 40s, blues, and maybe there's a couple other descriptive elements to it. What is it about that music that hit you in such a profound way?
Well, David, you know, the first time that I really cottoned on to that sort of thing was during the old Ed Sullivan show. You know, he'd come out right here in our show, and he'd bring somebody out. And one day on that program, he brought this guy out with a gravel voice and a big smile and a white hanky and a trumpet. And the guy began to sing and play. And I ran into my mother in the next room and I said, "Mom, listen to me. I think I got it done." And I found out that Louis Armstrong was nurtured by Jewish people. I believe that his real first name might have been Daniel. I'm not positive. But I just felt a kindred spirit with Louis Armstrong or Louis Armstrong. And that was the very first time. And it turned out my dad loved them too. And Dad loved Oscar Peterson and the classics and jazz and blues. He used to listen to the Cotton Club on a radio that he made himself. And so it was natural for me to just find my way into jazz and blues. But my brother, yeah, he really brought me along.
Fascinating you mentioned, and I think we've had, we did a show called Knishes and Grits about the Black Jewish musical experience and how they influenced each other. And Louis Armstrong.
Absolutely.
Hi. And you did a lecture, I think, Jews and Blues. And
it sounds a little harsh. It's exactly the same thing because that's what my dad taught me, David, Dad taught me, he said to me, and I remember it well, "Danny, we're Jewish people, look at what we've been through. We should be, maybe this sounds too simplistic, but he basically said we should be the last ones to be judging people negatively just by their skin color or their belief. He taught me that right away.
There's definitely a kinship with being the other and the outside looking in. And yeah, and how the black music influenced, whether it's sometimes the Jewish producers or, as you mentioned, some of the great composers using whose fathers were cantors and getting added inspiration, going to the Cotton Club and forming.
If I may jump in, this week coming up, I have decided to, I've been asked to do for Jazz FM a series of songs that are very influential. And I picked for some reason the song Brother Can You Spare a Dime by a guy named Leo Reisman. I said this was a song in the Depression. Imagine calling a whole era the Depression. And as I researched the song, I found out that the melody came from a Russian Jewish lullaby. Pardon my goosebumps. It's all connected.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so going back, so you had this influence growing up with the, and you mentioned the Ed Sullivan Show, which we all loved and got inspired, and a ukulele came into your life, a toy one, but then you got a real one. And it's amazing how a certain instrument that's sort of easier to play and not too frustrating can start a passion. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, because we all need an easy way at least to get started. And the ukulele that I first had, it was called a mouse guitar. And that's because both of my grandparents on both sides of the family, they owned dry goods stores and they would sell everything. So among the things that Papa Silverman, my mother's father, had at his store was these mouse guitars. You wind it up one way and it played Hickory Dickory Dock. Now, being the kind of guy I was, I wound it the opposite way and I got Dockery Dickory Hick or something. It was kind of a Jimi Hendrix moment. But this got me started because all the great music, the guitar is the instrument of the 20th century. So from Segovia through Peter, Paul and Mary, Elvis Presley, and then the Beatles, on and on and on, B.B. King, the guitar, B.B.'s guitar was like Louis's trumpet. Right. So once I started to get into the ukulele and found it was kind of easy, I got a ukulele that you actually played chords on, not just the mouse guitar. And then I begged my parents, please let me play the regular 6-string guitar. And of course they said, the same as my dad's mom had said to him, none of that jazz and rock and roll, you're gonna learn how to play it right. And of course, I really wanted to play Secret Agent Man and things of that nature. We went to Dave Snyder Music on Yonge Street, a store that is still there.
Sure.
And I got lessons from Tony Braden, the father of modern guitar in Canada. And, and the guitar, though, as easy as it is to start and do a few things, it has a way of making sure you're serious. It gets the tips of your fingers and it starts to hurt. And if you keep going, you get blisters, you get calluses, you might even bleed a little bit. And eventually, once you make it through trial and the pain and the fire, it starts to just feel great. And I can tell you there's no man-made object has felt more natural for me to hold in my arms than the Fender Stratocaster electric guitar.
I know as an actor, people ask me, how do you get involved in acting? And I usually tell people, you do it when you don't have a choice. You have to do it. There's no other thing you want to do. And I know you had that with music, but you also had a love of acting. And were taught by someone who's iconic in the Canadian theater world. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, David. You know, as a kid, I was fascinated by writing, and I still have my school books, and I wrote novels, and my dear dad laboriously typed out my novel, Escapees. And it was just for school, but you know, these kinds of projects, I was fascinated by painting and by art. My uncle was a very well-known artist in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. I wanted to be even a dancer for a while until I found out that you had to wear tights. And, you know, I mean, I look good in tights, but I left that alone, that kind of dancing alone. But I really was fascinated by acting and the stage. And so Mother, as always, took me to the best. And that best was the New Play Society, founded by the woman they named the Dora Awards after, Dora Maver Moore. she had a beautiful house, which has been, I believe, moved or destroyed, but it was at Bathurst, I want to say, and Briar Hill, but it might be a block north of there. And Dora Maver Moore nurtured a whole bunch of us here in Toronto, and she put me on the stage. It was a wonderful experience. But I have to say that once the Beatles came along, my brother and I had a standoff. He was still combing his hair back, you know, like this, and I was starting to comb it down. Even though my brother still found the Beatles before I did, because he had his ear to the ground, he said, "What do we need them for? We've got Smokey Robinson, we've got Chuck Berry, we've got the originators, John Lee Hooker, Jimmy Reed, his favorite. What do we need the Beatles for?" I said, "Paul, they're like us." And so, you know, like so many of my generation, I wasn't that different from everybody else. And especially, David, once we lost John F. Kennedy, the world needed something quick to turn to. And there we had 4 John F. Kennedys with the hair coming down and the strange voices and this magic music. It changed everything.
Wow, I'd love to hear a song, but before we do, if you can play a song for us, maybe something around that
Yes.
in the early years. I'm just curious, how has acting informed your music or the pursuit of acting and vice versa, or because you did do some acting, but mostly how has the training in acting informed you? You've had an amazing, iconic broadcasting career. Just in your music, how has it played a role?
Well, I think, David, that it gave me the confidence to get on stage and to speak, because I was in so many bands where, well, firstly, in my very first big band, the first band I really got a shot at stardom with, Edward Bear, it turns out I was the kind of the guy on the mic. I was the only one standing up. The drummer was sitting, the keyboard player was sitting, I was standing up. So it fell to me to be the one who told a few jokes here and there and announced the songs more often. But as I got into the 70s and 80s, I became sort of a hired gun on the guitar. And I noticed that whoever I was playing with had an awkward time addressing the audience. They had little cliche statements like, "We're going to slow it down now," or "We got room for one more couple on the dance floor." And then they'd let me on the mic. And the next thing I knew, I was like Groucho Marx out there. And, you know, I actually had the chance to use the Groucho term the other day when I went to the local cannabis store. And they asked me, I think it's okay to say this, it's legal. They asked me if I'd like to be part of their club. And I said, well, I couldn't be a part of a club that would have a guy like me as a member. And the 2 girls looked at me like, what does he mean? Of course, they'd never heard that before.
Not quite a reference. They're a little too young for that one.
Yeah.
Love to hear some music, something maybe from the earlier years that you loved or was iconic. I know I started the show off with the blues for Lonnie Johnson, which was fascinating.
That is an incredible story.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Maybe you can play a little bit of it live.
Well, I could play a little bit of it. I do have a song that I thought would maybe be just perfect for us today, because it's about 2 brothers.
Uh-huh.
And I know that you're very interested to hear about my relationship with my brother, and
Yes.
and because of the family connection and the Jewish traditions that teach us all about family. I would love to tell you about Lonnie Johnson, but the nutshell was that when I saw him as a kid, I had no idea who he was, but I saw that he very definitely had an aura like a halo around his head. I'd never seen that in a human being before, and frankly, never since. I asked, who is that little man with the halo? They said, it's Lonnie Johnson. And I kept the story for years. Then when I wrote that song, I sang it on TV. I was discovered by TV producers and given my own series based on the fact that I was able to talk about that song and talk about Lonnie Johnson. And I realized that Lonnie Johnson showed himself as an angel to me by saying, if you tell my story to the world and remind them that I was there before almost anyone on the guitar, I will be your angel. And he got me a TV series. So I thank Lonnie Johnson for that.
Yes.
Here's my guitar.
Wow.
Handy enough. And I don't know, David, tell me, how much time have I got to sing the song? Shall I make it short or?
No, let's hear it. Let's hear the song. Love to hear it.
play, where rivers run. Two brothers grew, and day by day, two brothers went their separate ways. I smile at you, you smile at me, and that's the way it ought to be. A lot of love that can be found, enough to reach the whole world round. Well, time goes by until at last you find your futures in the past. Gone are the days under the sun where children play and rivers run. Now brothers, just like rivers be, all rivers run down to the sea. It's there that they can be released, and then that they will live in peace. Well, time goes by until at last you find your futures in the past. Gone are the days under the sun where children play and rivers run. Yeah. Two brothers, yeah. Two brothers, whoa, yeah.
Wow, beautiful. Is your brother still around?
Yeah, but you know, I don't know exactly where he is anymore. I reached out to him, and he did respond, and he said, in the words of Mark Twain, and then I realized, wow, yeah, he's still alive, but that's why that song resonates for me. My brother, my sister, and I do not talk. I reach out, and I don't mind saying that it's that their response, I think, is to say that by my reaching, I am weak for needing them, and that if I didn't need them, I would be stronger. And they've refused. And you know, the thing is, I grew up in my brother's shadow for years, but then after a certain time, I went on my own. And my sister as well. I think that it's hard for them because I'm well known, and I'm not always the greatest guy, but who is? But I have reached out, and so anyway, that's a story. I don't think my parents, but you know, David, my mother and father did kind of make us sibling rivals, and so we needed to have gotten over that, but we never quite did. And that's the story there.
You know what? It's not unusual, and hearts harden, and all you can do is what you do is forgive and move forward, because life is too short. And at least you're giving the attempt by reaching out, and I commend you on that. It is amazing. But and speaking of Temple Sinai and Mishpacha, or family, can you tell us the connection with Cantor Charles Osborne and yourself?
Oh yeah, Temple Sinai. When we were kids, my parents were early on in Temple Sinai. My dad was, if I found out, I knew he was part of the Agilon Lodge, but I didn't realize he was the president at one point of Agilon Lodge.
Oh.
Dad was an ardent Zionist. He taught us very, very well and very clearly, not only in word, but in example. My father did not dole out any words of praise easily. So I remember that it was a great pride. I got to introduce him to Johnny Bauer at one point. But when he once told me, Danny, that's pretty good, to me, that was the highest praise. Mother, on the other hand, was our champion. And if mother saw that I was not doing well at school, she would ask them. And if they said they were going to fail me, she had my IQ tested, threw the papers down and said, it is not my son who is failing, it's your system. And they could not do that. So they were early on at Temple Sinai. They were there when the before the building was erected at 210 Wilson Avenue, and they were part of the congregation even before there was a temple. And so when we joined, they were part of a temple called Stage 210. And Mom was in the choir, and Dad was playing the harmonica behind the scenes because one of the actors was supposed to play harmonica but couldn't, and so they had a microphone, and my father was behind her with his harmonica, and he was fabulous on the chromatic harmonica. Dad could play any instrument. When we were kids, Rabbi Jordan Perlson was there at Temple Sinai, and he was a force of nature. And Alan Bly, who you know, was there even through the Elvis comeback special. He was the real jazz singer. And when he was there, Shema Yisrael, you know what I mean? Jack, like, he was cool.
Wow.
You know, so Alan Bly was cool. Now, my true life chosen brother in this planet is a jazz and blues and classical and all around wonderful musician, possibly the best guitarist I have ever seen, Rob Pilch. His brother Dave Pilch is a famous bassist. They're sons of the father, Bernie Pilch. And Bernie the late Bernie Pilch was a celebrated, very cool musician in our city, part of the Mo Kaufman era.
All right.
So Rob's sister, Sue Pilch, is a flautist. And it turns out, somehow through the miracle of life, is this wonderful man named Charles Osborne, who is currently the cantor at Temple Sinai. So Charles is kind of like a brother-in-law once removed. And when we first started speaking on the phone, I realized here was a kindred spirit, and not just to me, but in a way to Alan Bly, because Charles has been in bands, he's been in rock bands. You don't go to Temple Sinai, the cantor's office, and see a Fender Deluxe reverb amplifier sitting there, and him telling you, well, I think some of the tubes are bad. Like, my worlds are colliding. Right. Charles is a wonderful, wonderful man, totally unique. And our plan is to bring a Jewish and blues show to Temple, and to also, at the end of it, to invite members of the congregation who play and sing to get up. And it's not just going to be when Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. It's not just going to be that, but we're going to do that. What did you call it? Kreplach and Knishes and Knedlach and Knishes and Grit. Yeah, it'll be like that.
Right.
And boy, we can't wait for United Bakers to open up again. Like, we're just starving over here for that food.
I hear you. Well, that's a great story, by the way. And thank you for sharing that story about your family, which is so melancholic and heart-wrenching. And you did a song which I'd love to play and hear about, if it's the connection, the inspiration behind it. It's a delicate song that you wrote, the bird song.
You've got the bird song.
Yeah, and it comes up with a lyric, or rather a graphic. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you may know nothing about.
Yeah, that's a Facebook meme.
Right.
The bird. The thing about kindness is a Facebook meme, David. But the bird song is completely my own, and it just came to me, and it came to me because somehow the mandolin, which had stayed away from me all these years. I drum, I play bass, I play a little bit of keyboard, not much. Guitar's my first love. My hands are a little too, big for the mandolin, I thought. But when the mandolin finally presented itself to me, it gave me that song. I met a little bird with a broken wing, and how that little bird could sing. I'm glad you liked that one. That's a personal favorite.
Yeah, here it is here.
It doesn't, yeah.
Is it? How did you write this?
When did I write it? I would say that it may be as many as 4 years old now.
Oh, okay.
Or, I'm not really so sure. I'm not great on lists and numbers and things always.
Yeah.
But you know what? I haven't put it on an album yet, and because people have said that doesn't really fit in with the albums I've been making. It's a different kind of music. And that also the recording that you're listening to and playing, I made it right here in this room, and I am the only musician on that recording. The drums, the piano, everything. It's it's a one-man show like Stevie Wonder or Paul McCartney used to do, only not as good.
Right. And it's
I
interesting
hasten
you
to
say
add.
it doesn't quite fit. And yet that's sometimes where you get lightning in a bottle. Have you sort of bent sort of genres and introduced music in a different way? Can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Absolutely. You know, David, there's a time when all I ever want to hear is Rodrigo's Concerto of Aranjuez, which is maybe the most beautiful guitar piece for orchestra ever. Ba-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And that soothes my soul and fills my home up because I have a great stereo and record player downstairs and I turn it up loud in this house. And there are other times when it's only going to be T-Bone Blues, which we love to listen to, where he says, I love my babe, she is so mean to me. And you go, is that a contradiction? And there's other times where the only thing you ever want to hear is the guy who sings, who's gonna fill their shoes? Who's gonna stand that tall? And I'll tell you something else. There's other times when you'll be walking down the street and all you have to do is see the title of a Bob Marley song, and you can't get that out of your mind. So the thing is, here we are in a city, in an era, in a world where the world is coming together as one. Who is a purist in their music? And realistically so, every music I ever heard and loved has to come out in the songs that I write and create. That's the only natural thing to me. For somebody to say, you know, aren't you a blues musician? You shouldn't be doing this. Man, that has hurt me over the years, and that is wrong.
You know what? It's no different than in the acting world. I mean, I started off with television and ended up now with the theater company with Avery Saltzman. But we tend to, whether it's the roles you play, oh, he does that. You're always fighting
Typecast.
typecasting. I mean, there's some things that you're maybe an easier fit for, but you certainly can be typecast and not be allowed to do things that you could flourish in and do some great work in. And that's not unique to acting, as you point out. People like to think you're this kind of a musician rather, or this kind of play this kind of music. And you've had such an amazing career. I know we're talking musically, and then in some famous bands in the 60s. Edward Bear is one of them. And then you were a journeyman sort of guitarist playing with so many interesting, unusual people. Rick James being one of them, who was not necessarily the nicest person, as you point out.
Rick James,
Go ahead.
Rick James, the super freak, they call him.
Yeah.
You know, he had his songs and he was huge. In fact, you know, when you were speaking about actors and actresses that are typecast, we went to see Cher, and her show was fabulous. The opening act was all talking to the audience, everybody, 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 and everybody liked it. But when Cher came out, she spoke to each one of us as individuals, and she began to tell a story about how the singers didn't consider her a singer. The actors didn't consider her to be an actor. But when she went to accept her Academy Award for acting, she was grateful. And then she got this, and I think that is something that those of us who are diverse have to deal with. Everyone is calling for diversity, and yet they would like to see one-trick ponies because that simplifies them. And that goes even back to Lonnie Johnson, and why Lonnie Johnson is forgotten, because on the first page of blues and jazz guitar, there's Lonnie Johnson. And people don't know how to pigeonhole him. And because he didn't want to act like a downtrodden blues musician who couldn't put two words together and came out in overalls, they didn't know how to market him. They didn't know how to pitch him. But your question, I guess, was more about Rick James. Imagine working with Rick James one day, Tiny Tim the next, Bo Diddley the next.
Wow.
Now, I would say that Tiny Tim and Bo Diddley did have a lot of things in common. They were both great rhythm guitarists or rhythm ukuleleists. They both loved and treasured their audience. They both were iconic figures who were unmistakable when you saw their image. And they were both very kind, and they were both nurturing to me. And I have worked with a lot of well-known Canadians, but Bo Diddley was great. I have his picture on my wall. Tiny Tim was lovely. Rick James was not terribly nice in a lot of ways. But he was a sad guy, and he's gone. He can't defend himself from beyond the grave, wherever the hell he is.
Mm-hmm. And were you around or playing with ever with Burton Cummings, or was it a tight knit circle in the 60s and 70s so far as knowing the
Not
beginning
really,
of the scene?
you know. But if you mention Burton Cummings to me, David, I have only met him a couple of times, and I also met his partner, Randy Bachman. They were the two founders of Guess Who. Randy's been very, very friendly to me. I get the feeling that he's heard me on the radio, because people sometimes say, "Wow, that's funny. I heard a song on his program that you played a couple of weeks ago, and he never played it before." I go, "Okay, well, that's a compliment."
Yeah.
Burton Cummings, though, both of those guys get a bad rap that is not right, because Burton, when I met him, he was lovely. We had the same thing as with Tiny Tim. There was a microphone stand malfunction with Tiny Tim, and Tiny Tim was lying on his back singing Hank Williams, and he was going crazy, and he somehow knocked the mic over, and the mic was on a boom stand, and it almost fell on him, and I was sitting beside him. I reached out, grabbed the mic and the stand, and held it away from his face, and he was like, "Oh yeah, thank you." With Burton Cummings, we were on the Variety Telethon, and I'm busy playing and singing. Burton's over there at the piano. My mic started to just fall down. The stand just fell down. Burton jumped off the piano, put the mic stand up, and adjusted it like this, and looked at my face like that.
Oh.
And he was very sweet and very kind. I mean, I think the thing is that famous people get a bad reputation, and people, they kiss up to them, and then when you don't want to, "Hey, you don't have to call me sir and tell me that," and then they go the opposite way on you, and it's just somewhere in the middle is how it's tough to be as famous as a Burton Cummings or any of them.
But people are people, as we like to say. And speaking of, I'd be remiss not to talk about, I know as we're talking right now on June the 4th, there's certainly multiple crises that are going on, and particularly in the States with Black Lives Matter. Do you have any, speaking of diversity, do you have any feelings about what's going on, and I guess what next steps need to get done, or where you see the States going?
I think that there are powerful forces that have a lot of money who want to affect the direction that our world is going in. I mean, there's no question of that. There's no question that people are playing with the planet, with the earth. And as much as I believe that many of these terrible things that are happening are true, I don't deny that they're true. I don't deny that there is this awful flu-like epidemic that's going on, or pandemic, and we are wearing gloves and masks the whole time. I don't deny that there's terrible racism going on. I believe that in Canada, most of our racism or prejudice or bias, a lot of our horrible history towards the indigenous people of this country needs to be addressed. And in the United States, the racism question is awful, but there are so many good people on all sides who are doing their best day to day. This isn't something new, but what I'm seeing is that somehow it's being triggered, it's being played, and people are being played against each other. Good people are being forced to be angrier and angrier, and what's happening is some people are almost like having a contest of who's more sanctimonious. And now I don't see a lot of racism because my friends never were racists for the very most part. But what I am seeing is a lot of people calling other people these names, and it's not right. And somebody is ramping this up for their own good. David, I feel that when we come out of this situation, if we ever do, the most vulnerable among us will be the ones that are hurt the most. The ones with the great wealth, be they in China, and it's okay to say China. I'm not talking about all of Asia. I'm not talking about all of Asians. I'm talking about this one huge superpower. And the ones in the United States, the ones in Europe, the bankers, the very wealthy people are still gonna possibly even tighten their grip on us as they do a battle. And those of us who are weak, the small business owners, the people that wanna just be musicians and artists, the kids who wanna go to school, we're the ones that are going to be hurt. And now there's been a battle going on between people who want vaccinations across the board, people who don't want any vaccinations, and the majority of us who are in the middle who say, you know what, if it's the right thing to do, let's do it. This battle has been going on, and now they call themselves vaxxers and anti-vaxxers. But what is that?
Yeah.
And in the end, somebody's going to be totally controlling that. And in the end, when it comes to a cashless society, we will not have cash anymore. And that'll serve a lot of purposes, because every transaction will be traced. Anytime you go to the supermarket and buy a certain kind of yogurt, you're going to see ads for it for the rest of your life. This is because people need to be tracked, and cell phone information and chips under your skin. Now, I'm not a believer in, right? This is where I'm going with this.
No, you're right.
And I'm not a big, just let me, this one thing, just because you got me on this. I'm not a huge believer in everything the Bible says, and Revelations and all of that might be a little too woo-woo for some people. But a friend of mine who is very ardent and chose Christianity as her way, she told me, Danny, you should read, because a lot of this has been prophesized down through the years, that this is the stranglehold that oppression will have against all of humanity. And I say, let's fight against that. Let's not let that take the joy and the simplicity and the randomness out of life, the good side of it.
I like that open possibility of hope at the end. And going back to music,
you got to have that.
You got to have that. And music is a big part of the healing of people's, as you said, for yourself as well, you know, in their minds and their hearts. It is amazing to me. We did a play, The Pianist of Williston Lane, and people were so moved by it, classical pianist. It goes right directly to the heart. And music does that to the soul and heart, and it has a healing component. I'd love you to play us out of this interview. It's just touching Danny Mark's life, because you've done so many amazing things, and I apologize the interview is short as it is. You've been incredible. Is there a song, I'm putting on the spot here, that is that hope, that light, that will give us something good to feel about as our day moves on, that you have in your repertoire?
I think so, David. You know, one thing I found was that a lot of my songs, I think they're about one thing, but it turns out they're about living and dying. And who would have guessed when I wrote it? But yes, music is a great healer. There's no underestimating the power of music, because as we sit here, we see this happen where we put the music on and suddenly everything feels better. Music is a great tool for that. And generally, I appreciate you allowing me a chance to speak, because generally I want the music to do the talking. So here is another guitar that I have. It's a 1930s Gibson, and it's a favorite guitar here at our house. And let's see if I can get the sound up on this. Is that coming through?
Yes, it is. Beautiful.
I'm going home, maybe tomorrow. I'm going home to see my kin. I'm going back to my old family. And I don't know when I'll pass this way again, Lord, Lord. I don't know when I'll pass this way again. Good people here have made me welcome and made me feel one of their own. Good people here have made me welcome, but it's past time this rambling boy was heading home. Lord, Lord, past time this rambling boy was heading home. I've been away for such a long time. I'll still recognize the place. I've been away for such a long time. I can't wait to see my mama's shining face. Lord, Lord, I can't wait to see my mama's smiling face. I can't wait to see my mama's shining face. Oh, Lord, I can't wait to see my mama's shining face.
Beautiful. Danny, Lonnie Johnson transferred his luminescence onto you, because thank you so much for your authenticity, your honesty, your talent, and it's been a sheer joy interviewing you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, David. It's been a really wonderful, eye-opening experience and a pleasure speaking to you. You're a terrific interviewer, and one thing that you do, that you listen.
I'm
Thanks.
sorry, what was that? Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it.